I'm actually a pastor from the state of Illinois, but I am spent 40 years in Michigan. It's my home state. It's kind of nice to see some fellow Michiganders here and there. I do love it in Illinois, so I'm having a great time there. So meanwhile, are we ready to dig in? Yes. Awesome, awesome. Well, check this out. Here's the map of the United States. Now, in this little red spot, you'll see it's over there in the state of Washington. In that little red spot, that is the location of a volcano called Mount St. Helens. Now, something very special happened around the year 1980. Okay, now who here was alive in 1980? Okay, I'm noticing a lot like younger faces here than at the last place I was at this morning. So more people were aware of what was happening in 1980. And so in 1980, the volcano erupted and the ashes flew all the way to Michigan. In 1980, okay, that's what happened. The ashes of the volcano flew all the way to Michigan. In fact, I was living in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan at the time. You'll see that up there. And I was there at K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base in 1980. I got out of the house. I looked out in our car, and the car was covered in soot and ash. And it was so weird. Although as a kid, I had no idea it was soot and ash. I had no idea. I just saw that somebody TP'd our car. That's kind of how I saw it in my mind. Like somebody did something to our car. I ran in. I was like, Ma, something happened to the car. She's like, what? I'm like, I don't know. It's like it got repainted. There's dirt on it. There's mud. There's just stuff all over it. Check it out. My mom went out. She looked at it. She was shocked. She looked at the neighbor's car, same thing. Neighbor's car, same thing. There's just ash all over the Air Force Base. It was bizarre. Went on to the news, and they were talking about how the ash had traveled all the way across the United States. I mean, that's a boom, right? And that's a volcanic boom. So here's a picture of Mount St. Helens before it exploded there in 1980. Okay, so that's before it exploded. Then, at one point, it started to smoke. And you knew something was about to happen until finally, like that of a massive atom bomb, kablowy, okay? It exploded, but it didn't explode up like most volcanoes do. It exploded out. Okay, so all that power went out instead of up. And that is why all that sand and dirt and stuff flew all the way across the U.S. like that. And so it absolutely exploded. So there's the cap. There's what it looks like now. Do you see how it's a crater, but it has this rocky, crusty thing over the top? That's a cap that was formed, and it's kind of important to notice that cap. I want you to memorize it. See that cap? Isn't it special? Okay, I just want you guys to remember that because we're going to refer to it later on. So I just want you to remember that there's a cap there now, and also there's a stream that is flowing, which is really bizarre because it wasn't there before the volcano eruption. Okay, it's a brand new river. Isn't that cool? And it's like, wow, who knew that rivers could just pop up? Like, who knew that could happen? And scientists are in disagreement what happened and why the river's there. Kind of the current theory is that the ash and soot and mud from the volcanic eruption interfered with Spirit Lake, so now the river's coming out from Spirit Lake. However, they're also saying that from the direction it's sourced in the volcano, so not Spirit Lake. So I guess they don't really know what's happening with that river, other than it's there, and isn't that wild? And other things have happened at the volcanic site there, is that these have happened. Canyons have formed. Okay, canyons have formed. And not like, the volcano didn't carve the canyons out. It's not like the blast was like a giant hoe going, that's not what happened. This is from the dirt of the volcano traveling and landing, forming the canyons. Okay, it actually traveled and landed and formed the canyons. In fact, if you look closely, if you look at this closely, you'll see at the top, you'll see that thicker layer. So you see the thick layer at the bottom, multiple layers, and then a thick layer at the top. Do you see that thick layer? That's from a mudslide that happened after all the soot had landed. Okay, so that mudslide came in on top of it all. Now here's something bizarre. This canyon and the cliffs that were layered, all the sand, all the dirt, all the sediment landed and formed the sediment layers within a 6-hour period. It all happened in a 6-hour period. We know this because we watched it. Okay, it happened in a 6-hour period. And some of the canyons and cliffs are over 600 feet high. So the canyon that is there now, they call it 600 feet deep. but really it's 600 feet high. We just don't talk about canyons with height. We talk about them in depth, so it gets confusing. Okay, so it's 600 feet high. That means there are places that you walk along there that are actually, from 1979, was the sky. Okay, because 600 feet, that's the sky, right? I know the sky's higher, but you get the idea. If you were to be 600 feet in the air, would you be scared of dropping without a parachute? Absolutely. Why? Because you're in the sky, okay? So it's the sky. So it's 600 feet. In fact, here's a picture of a guy standing at one of the parts of the canyon there. Just to give you the idea of some of the shallower parts, we could actually get the whole thing in one picture. This whole thing happened in how long? 6 hours. 6 hours. Look how nice the layers are. Look how smooth the lines are. Isn't that amazing? And that river that's running is running perpendicular to the line cuttings of the line layerings of the canyon walls. So the water's going this way and the canyon walls are running this way. So it kind of makes a perpendicular type action, which is kind of interesting. And we see something very similar to this happening at a place like the Grand Canyon, where there's all these layers, and all these layers are there, and there's a river running through the Grand Canyon, running perpendicular to the rock cuttings and the rock layers of the Grand Canyon, which is interesting. So it's very similar, isn't it? Very interesting. I almost wonder if there was an event that is greater than a volcano that might have happened that would have made the Grand Canyon, given that all the sediment layers are exactly like this canyon at the Grand Canyon. I wonder what event might have happened in history greater than a volcano. Any guesses? The flood! Yes! The flood! In fact, so much evidence is being found about the Grand Canyon pointing to a global flood that most evolutionists now have conceded to a global flood. They just claim that a meteor hit an ocean, causing a giant tsunami that flooded the whole world. Literally, that's kind of what's being taught now. Okay, so they are agreeing with the flood thing. So it's interesting. The more scientists are observing data and evidences, the closer to the Bible they're getting. You know, they would just save so much time and money if they would just start with the Bible instead of slowly working there and occasionally agreeing with it from time to time as they go on. But what's interesting is that they are just starting with that presupposition, that earliest belief that the Bible's wrong, it is not a historical account, it has no authority, so don't look at it, don't refer to it, it belongs on the shelf with fairy tales, and just kind of ignore it, and now let's look at the data all by itself without ever considering biblical material. And then they end up in crazy places. And we see those crazy places. Like when they date that cap. So about 3 years ago, when I was doing the research on this, about a year and a half ago on the cap, okay, my notes has said a year and a half ago, and that's because at that point, it was a year and a half ago, it was a year and a half ago. So 3 years ago, 3 years ago, they dated the cap. That little crust inside the crater. That cap was dated to be 350,000 years old. I am not making that up, okay? They reported that the cap was 350,000 years old. I got news for you. We know when that cap was made. I'm older than that cap, okay? I am older than that cap. That cap is less than 40 years old, and I'm over 40, so I'm older than that cap. So there's no way it's 350,000 years old. It's impossible, okay? And so it's interesting how they're just getting things messed up, because they don't understand what they're looking at. They don't understand what they're dealing with when they're dealing with the earth. It's fascinating. Okay, and so in fact, when you look at the Grand Canyon, there's some very fascinating things about the Grand Canyon, and that has to deal with the fossils that are there. And we're going to see a picture in just a moment. Okay, so at the Grand Canyon, there was fossils there. Now, something you need to know about fossils. They have been taught, at least to me, wrong. And at the university that I teach at, there's a secular biology book that I have from there that also teaches fossils wrong. It teaches it like this, that an animal dies, lays on the ground, and over thousands and thousands of years, land begins to, dirt forms over top of it and slowly starts burying it, causing it to become a fossil over a 1,000,000-year period. And they call it a long, slow, gradual process. That's why the dinosaur, they say because you can't go above the layers because it has to be within the layer that are thousands and thousands, if not millions of years in each layer. That's how they describe it. That's how they teach it. There's a problem with that. Fossils cannot be formed that way. It is impossible. Because if an animal dies and it lays on the ground for thousands of years, what's going to happen to the body? It's going to decompose, number one. It's going to get devoured, number two, and it's going to get destroyed, number three. Right? Either it's going to decompose and turn into its own form of dust before it ever fossilizes, or it's going to get devoured by scavengers and birds and maggots and bugs, okay? Or it's going to get destroyed from rain or the wind or tornadoes or whatever have you. Okay, so it has to be a rapid burial. That's the thing we need to learn about fossils. It has to be rapid. Absolutely rapid. It has to be completely covered, and that is how the animal dies. It has to be completely covered in a rapid way. And we actually see that this is what happens. We have evidence of the rapid burial, like this beautiful fossil here of a fish eating another fish, and it's fossilized. So think about that for a moment. If it had to bite a fish and then slowly get buried over thousands of years, that's a heck of a meal. Like, I've had a meal close to that one time, I guess. I was eating steak, and it was a big old chewy part, and I'm sitting here for like a half hour. And my daughter had the same thing. She's chewing. She's like, Daddy, I can't swallow it. I can't chew it. What's wrong with it? I'm like, yeah, let's just be gross here in the restaurant. Oh, let's get another bite. Maybe that, but no. I mean, it's like, look at this. This is amazing. It's a fish eating another fish, which, mind bender, notice that this fish had to get buried under sand. When a fish starts dealing with a little bit of sand, usually what is it going to do? Swim away. Okay, it's usually going to swim away. And so it had to have been a rapid situation, so rapid that it got buried mid-meal. Oh, here's a fun one, another one here for you. It's of a dinosaur, an underwater dinosaur. You see that thing coming out in the back? That's its baby. It's giving birth and was fossilized in the birthing process. Okay, now I'm telling you, that's a heck of a birth right there. Well, I know some ladies feel like, yes, giving birth is forever. And I know some here might even feel like, I wish the baby would just come now. Like, why is it taking so honking long? And so that can be felt by many women, but this is insane, right? Giving birth, and then it gets fossilized during the birthing process. Okay, so we know that it had to happen rapidly. Evolutionists are beginning to figure this out. They are now conceding that it has to happen rapidly. That is why they're saying that when the meteor hit the middle of the oceans, causing the tsunamis, it also caused a bunch of mudslides that buried all the animals that we have fossils of. Again, they're just getting closer and closer to the Bible. We're just getting closer there. It's amazing. Okay, and so there's a lot of great things that are happening. Oh, here's something fun. On top of the Grand Canyon, they found this. This is on top of the Grand Canyon. It is a fish fossil. There were fish on the top of the Grand Canyon. There's multiple fish fossils up there, which means that the Grand Canyon was not carved by a river over millions of years. The Grand Canyon was laid underwater so that fish would die and bury over top of it. Doesn't this sound more like the global flood again? Oh, even more fun is this fossil picture. This is from the top of Mount Everest, the highest peak on the earth. And there's snail and clam and fish fossils on top of Mount Everest, and seashell fossils on top of Mount Everest. That's the highest mountain, y'all. That's like you can't get higher in the sky than that without a plane, okay? Unless you're standing on the top of the mountain and went like that. But other than that, you're not getting any higher on this planet without devices. And there's sea fossils up there. I mean, that is a trip. How did that happen? That means that at some point, the highest peak in our world had to be under water. At some point, the highest point of our earth had to be absolutely under water. And so we're going to kind of look at this a little bit here. We're going to look at some of the details of the flood. So check this out, some verses for you. So Noah was 600 years old. Oh, how old was he? 600. Whoa, man, remember that. Adam lived to be like 900 some years old. Noah lived to be hundreds of years old. Just remember that people lived differently back then. They lived longer. We get that recording all the time. That's going to be important for later. It's going to be important for later. Just note that he's 600 years old. Oh, here's something that'll trip your mind. Noah and Adam's lifelines technically overlap a little bit. They possibly could have met each other. Isn't that a trip? Just look that timeline up sometime. So Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came on the earth. That's right. He's building the ark when he's 600 years old. I couldn't build a boat at my age. I'd be so tired. My kids are like, Daddy, come play. And I'm like, okay, cool. Come on the trampoline. Okay. Jump on the trampoline. Like 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, Daddy's done. Daddy's done. I'm like, no, Daddy, jump some more. No, Daddy needs a hospital. Daddy's done. Not no more. Okay, and they're still going. Like, I don't know how. 600 years old, that's impressive. That's impressive. So the floodwaters came on the earth, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Pairs of clean and unclean animals, of birds and all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark, as God has commanded Noah. And after the 7 days, the floodwaters came on the earth. So Noah was on the ark for a week before everything started happening. Kind of keep that in mind. Okay, in the 600th year of Noah's life, the Bible's repeating itself on purpose. Whenever the Bible repeats itself and is talking circular, the author is saying, hey, reader, wake up, take notice, this is important. I mean, if it's already in the Bible, obviously it's important. If it's in the Bible twice, it's really important, okay? So it's really important. So in the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month, so we really know when this happened. Like, we can nail this down on a calendar, okay? On that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On that very day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. They had with them every wild animal according to its kind, all livestock according to their kinds, every creature that moves along the ground according to its kind, every bird according to its kind, everything with wings. Pairs of all creatures that have the breath of life in them came to Noah and entered the ark. The animals going in were male and female of every living thing, and God had commanded Noah. Then the Lord shut him in. People make a lot of notice that the Lord shut him in. Some people think because the door was too heavy to open or close, so God had to do it. I tend to think a little differently than that. It's a very possibility that it was about weight, but it looks like Noah was a pretty strong guy. He probably could have done it. I just think the Lord had to shut him in because I don't know, if I were Noah, if I could actually close the doors. I don't know if I could do it. Why? Because once the doors are shut, what does that mean? Everybody else is going to die, and no one else is coming in. That means the kids that my kids played ball with aren't coming in. That means the neighbors that I went shopping with and had barbecue with and played euchre with or whatever, they're not coming in. That means the people I went to school with, the people I grew up with, that means friends and co-workers, nobody's coming in. And then when the water starts coming and people start pounding and they're saying, we're sorry, let us in, let us in. We're sorry, let us in. Please, Noah, let us in, let us in. I would be so tempted to open that door. I know me. I would be so tempted to let them in because I would hear the people. And so it's nice that God shuts the door. God's the one that says the time has come. The line has been drawn. We're on the other side of that line, and it is over, and it is finished. So God is in charge of this, and he is doing this. So for 40 days, the flood kept coming on the earth. And as the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. Is there evidence of this? That the highest mountain was covered? Yeah, we saw the fossils already. Okay, so the Bible's right. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits, which means that you could not even begin to even reach down and swim down and touch the top of the highest mountain without having to gasp for air and go back up. You would probably drown. Okay, we're talking as a great big distance. You cannot live on this earth outside of that ark. It is not happening. It is not happening. Okay, every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all of mankind. Everything on dry land that had breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds that were wiped out of the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. How many of you have ever went on a vacation with family for 2 weeks and left the 2 weeks wanting to strangle each other? Right? If you have kids, that's definitely going to be true, right? In fact, you don't even have to wait 2 weeks. Usually about 2 hours into the trip, you're about ready to say, boy, you're going to be in the back of a milk carton. If you ask me, are we there yet, one more time? Like, this is over, okay? This is not happening, okay? And Noah was with his family on the ark for how long? Oh, for a long time. Because remember, he was on it for a week before the rain started. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. So now we're up to 47 days at least, right? And then the water stayed on top of the earth, completely flooding for 150 days more. You'll see later that the waters recede. It takes 150 days for the water to recede, which means Noah and company were on the ark for a minimum of 150 plus 150, which is 300, plus 40, which is 340, plus 7, which is 347. And after the water started receding, you still have several weeks of waiting, sending out birds, trying to find out what's going on. Okay, because even after the 150 days, the waters weren't receded, they were still receding. Okay, so he was on the ark for about a year. A year. I mean, let your brain think that in for a moment. A year on one boat with the same kids, with the same daughters-in-law. A year. Okay, a year. Imagine what this felt like. Because here's how it started. And I get so frustrated with children's material regarding the flood. When you really stop and think about it, the flood's not a really good PG level story for children. And it's really sad that you always see pictures of Noah smiling and all the animals smiling. There was nothing to smile about. Because once that door shut and that rain came down, here's what Noah heard. People pounding, animals screaming. Animals screaming. Soon people screaming. As the boat's being lifted up, people are climbing trees, climbing mountains, yelling and shouting, shrieking in terror. And then comes the worst sound you could ever imagine. Silence. Just the sound of the rain hitting the boat. No more screams, no more animals calling, no more birds tweeting. All you're hearing is the occasional of a body thumping up against the boat from the outside. Because you're talking a lot of people have died. A lot of animals have died. And dead bodies tend to float. And they're hitting the boat. Hitting the boat. This was a dark time for Moses, or Noah. I'll get it right. It was a dark time for Noah. A dark time. A scary time. I mean, imagine, now he's the only family left on the planet. What is it going to look like when you get off? Because you're not going to have people to talk to. You're not going to have people to ask advice from that knows things you don't know. Maybe he doesn't know how to do every piece of farming, and he's always relied on neighbors to help him with some of his crops. Who knows? He has to do it on his own now. It's just him. I mean, the websites are down forever. There's no internet towers now. There weren't before either. Okay, this is a dark time. This is a time of absolute fear. And so Moses is having to deal with this. And as I study this material and I look through this, my brain goes in weird places, because when it gets really dark and serious, sometimes my coping mechanism of serious times is to respond with humor or very weird and bizarre questions. And so I like to ask during this part of the study, how many people died? And the answer is all of them. But I wanted to know the number. I wanted to know the number itself. And so when I was doing this research a while back, right when COVID was just starting off, my wife and I, we went and we visited the Ark exhibit. Anybody ever been to Ark Encounter down there in like a Kentucky area? Okay, that's a really great place to go to. That's a really trippy place to be. Okay, it's a really cool place. And I was so fortunate that somebody there asked the same question, how many people died? Because they had a little poster that you could see that actually had some of the math on it. And it's really obscurely located. It's kind of hard to see. Most people missed it. I say, man, this is my favorite part. And they're like, what? That was there? I'm like, yeah, it was there. It was so cool. This is how many people died. So let me just kind of share with you the joys of this. Because, why not, right? You're welcome. So here's a mathematical equation for this, and I'll help you out. I know this is like you woke up this morning saying, man, I hope that when I go to church we do math. That'd be so sexy. That would just be the best ever. Like, that's what I want from church. So you're welcome, math. Isn't that great? And you ask your teachers, when am I ever going to use algebra outside of the classroom? Today's the day. No one in math can ask that question of your teacher ever again, because you're using it today. You're welcome. So here's how this begins to work. We're going to look at that PGR number. That is the present growth rate. Okay, we're going to start there. And using the present growth rate, we have an equation on how to determine the present growth rate. It is this equation here. This is what secular science and sociologists use all the time. The present growth rate is the current birth rate, subtract the current death rate, divided by 10 so that you can get a percentage out of it. Okay, so that's kind of what's happening here. So you got to take the current birth rate and the current death rate and divide it by 10. Don't you feel enlightened? Okay, and so what we're going to do here for this original numbers is we're going to use 2009 data. So we have the 2010 census that we have direct information from, and we're able to apply that backward to 2009 and see what the birth rate is, and we're going to take that and find that percentage. So what the numbers are is, if I can have that equation back one more time for a second, the CBR, current birth rate for us was 20, that's 20 per thousand, that was the birth rate, and the death rate was 8 per thousand in 2009. So if you take 20 and you subtract 8, you get 12. See, you guys are good at math. And you are all concerned. And you take 12, okay, then you divide it by 10, you get a percentage, which is 1.2. So 1.2 is a percentage. Now that n over that equation was for number of years. Okay, so now it's been replaced here with 1656. That is taking the Bible at its word from the birth of creation, when God said, here's the first day, all the way up until the day of Noah, which gave us the specific date, right? Okay, and there's several dates throughout the Old Testament that we're able to know when things happened, that taking the Bible at its word, you come up with 1,656 years. Okay, now you started creation with two people, Adam and Eve. So if we follow this equation that sociologists use, and starting with Adam and Eve, so starting with 2, we're able to fill out this math, and we come up with a number of 758,505,000 people. However, this number is wrong. This number is wrong because the death rate is off and the birth rate is off. Right? Because how long did Noah live? 600 years. In 2009 and 2010, the life expectancy was between the ages of 78 and 80. Okay, that's the life expectancy. So when people live to be 800 years old, 900 years old, 500 years old, and the average birth rate per person, per family, is roughly about 2 to 3, and people back then had many more kids than that. Some didn't. Noah had 3 originally there, but they have many, many kids of their own, and many other people had many, many kids. Adam had several sons and daughters, okay, not just Cain and Abel, but so many more. Okay, so there was a lot higher birth rate, lot lower death rate. So if we were to say that rather than 8 per 1,000 was the death rate, and just lower that by 2 to 6 per 1,000 as a death rate, and just changing that number only, okay, and just changing that number only. So the 1.2% would then become 1.4, right, because 20 minus 6 equals 14. Pop in the 10, get the decimal point, we get 1.4. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. So if it were that, and I still think this number is going to be too low, because we haven't really accounted for the birth rate and stuff like that. We just accounted for the death rate only. Okay, so just accounting for that, we come up with this number. 19.9 billion people were in the world when the flood started. So roughly 20 billion people. And like I said, this number is still too small. How many people are in the world today? In the whole world? 7.3 billion people. Okay, so over 7 billion people in the world today. You know what that means? The population then was almost triple what it is in the world today. And in the world today, we hear people screaming and crying about overpopulation and population control. And we have people in our current government asking questions if there needs to be a birth cap for families in the United States, and trying to repeat what China already realized they screwed up on. And so people are freaking out that we're overpopulating and the resources are bad and everything is going crazy. And we look back in time and we're able to see that the earth is able to handle a whole lot more than what we currently are. It's almost as if God knows how to take care of His creation. It's almost like God knows how to provide space for us to exist. In fact, one secular researcher, a professor from Dallas, Texas, found out that if you take every single person on the earth and you had them stand shoulder to shoulder, back of their head to your nose, and you crowded everybody that tight, the entire world's population fits in the state of Indiana in one county. Our world is not overpopulated. That is not the problem. But evolutionists want to say that. They want to scare us all the time. We're overpopulated. Everything's going to come. This is the end. We got to have less kids. And people start looking at people who have 5 kids and 7 kids and go, man, what's wrong with you? Wasn't 2 enough? And they start criticizing big families. And that needs not to ever be a concern or worry if you're based on the Bible. See, you remove the Bible, all you're going to leave is fear. That's all you're going to have left is fear and anger and hatred. Where does the hatred come from? Because once you say you're removing the Bible, you always replace it with something. That's called idolatry. Whenever idolatry is an action that is happening, always, 100% of the time, when you have an idolatry situation, the opposition is demonized. Because if you go against their false god, you are blaspheming their only hope, and they're going to hate you for it. That's why there's so much hatred in this world. Because if you remove the Bible, all you have left is fear and idolatry. And you automatically demonize the opposition. And just check it out. Think this through to logical conclusion on this, and you'll see this to be true. If you were to idolize your political party, Republicans are the answer, Democrats are the answer, what do you do to your opposition? You demonize. Is that happening today? Okay, if you are saying that, hey, my ethnicity is the most important ethnicity, what do you do then to the opposition? You demonize. What's that called? Yeah, we call it racism. Okay, and so you see the demonization of opposition all the time. We should expect it. That's what happens when you take the Bible out of the equation. Fear and idolatry and hatred is always going to happen. It is always, always going to happen. And when we look at the Bible and we take it at its word, we see that we do not have to be afraid of various things. Yes, we need to be responsible for the resources we use. Yes, we want to be good stewards of God's creation. Yes, we want to take care of that which God has asked us to take care of. Because remember, we're supposed to take care of creation. We're supposed to develop it and take care of it. So that is important. And we do not have to be afraid that we have run out of space. I have people, whenever I present this, they give me pushback. And they'll say, well, what about those people that are starving in all these other countries? To which I will say, I have been to some of the poorest nations in the world. They have food, they won't eat it because they idolize cows. And cows are yummy. Okay? I praise God he made cows out of meat, because that is amazing that he did that. Okay? I mean, cows are amazing things. You get some barbecue sauce or you get some ketchup, you're good to go. Some salt and pepper, some marinade. It's awesome stuff. And when you idolize something and you're not eating the food that's available, you're going to starve. There's also people that won't leave certain lands that are uninhabitable. And they just need to leave those lands to other lands where there's food. I know it's easier said than done. But we are looking at people saying we are overpopulating, we need to cap all over the world, when in reality, that's not the problem. It is individual cultural issues that are the problem. And we don't need to rule everybody out from under that, because we can see that the world can handle it. God's creation can handle lots more people than we currently are. And so, as we look into this, there's one more thing I want to point out of Genesis, the flood story here, that I want you to see. And this is, and for me, the most important part. So if you take anything home with you today, regardless of all the strata we talked about, and the Mount St. Helens, and Mount Everest, and all the fossils, and all that stuff, I do want you to hear this. Chapter 8, verse 1. It starts off like this. And God, what? Remembered. And God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark. This is curious. God remembered? What, does that mean that somehow God forgot? I mean, that's how it almost seems, right? Like as if God's like, oh, look, I got a whole globe, and it's full of water. Bath time. Get me my little rubber ducky. You know, and you're just ready to go. Like, here we go. And, oh, wait a minute. I know I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh, look, what's that? There's a boat. I don't remember that boat. Oh, yeah. Noah. Oh, dang, dude, bro. I'm sorry. It's been 150 days. Oh, man, I'm sorry, bro. We're going to fix this up, okay? Recede. Is that what happened? No, because we know from Scripture and in the Psalms that God is an all-knowing God. So to remember doesn't mean he forgot. But then why does it say remember? And so I did a search on this. Several times in the Bible we have this exact phrase, and God remembered. Several times. In Genesis 19:29, and God remembered Abraham. In Genesis 30:22, and God remembered Rachel. In Exodus 2:24, God remembered Israel and the covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, and then in 1 Samuel 1:19, and God remembered Hannah. And it's literally these phrases, and God remembered, God remembered, God remembered, God remembered. Either he is the most forgetful God possible, or something else is going on. And it's the latter. Something else is going on, and this is important. And God remembered. This is a covenantal term. I know the word covenant might seem kind of odd. We tend to think in our culture in ideas of contracts. And covenant is different than a contract. Contract is basically a deal. I'll give you money if you give me a car. Sounds like a deal? Good. Here you go. Here's the money. Here's the car. A covenant is about a relationship, kind of like a marriage. Okay, so there are certain terms that God uses within that covenant, within that relationship between him and his creation. And one of those terms is this term, remembered. It's just used differently than we use it. We use it when we try to stop forgetting something, but that's not how God uses it. God uses it what it means is, when he uses it, is to take notice, and it's an action of deliverance. So when the Bible says, and God remembered, what it's saying is, God notices the situation, he knows what's going on, and he is choosing that now is the time to intervene. Now is the time to step in and change where it's going. Now's the time. So in the book of Exodus 2:24, this is where Israel's in slavery, and they're in bondage, and that there's a Pharaoh that came into power, and he put them into slavery, and he's abusing them, and he's killing them, and he's killing babies, and it's a horrible, dark time. And in the middle of that darkness, Israel cries out to God, and they say, "God, help us!" And God remembered the covenant. God remembered Israel. He remembered Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's Noah. Everybody's dead. Everything is disastrous. The waters are just pounding against the ark. It's the darkest moment of his life. And God remembered Noah. Because right after verse 1, verse 2 is where the waters begin to recede. That is what's happening in chapter 8 as the waters begin to recede. Because God says, now is the time to step in. Then there's an occasion of this in the New Testament. And it's really fascinating. It's worded a little differently. But check this out. When Jesus is on the cross and he's dying, there's a thief on one side and a thief on the other side, right? And one thief turns to Jesus and says, "Remember me when you bring in your kingdom." Remember me. What an interesting choice of words. Remember me. Not just don't forget me, but notice me. Deliver me. And what does Jesus say? I tell you the truth. Today, you're going to be with me in paradise. It is Jesus saying, I will remember you. I notice you. I see you. And you're going to be delivered. You're going to die, and you will be in my kingdom. That is a promise. And I want you to know that whenever you are going through life, and life will pound at you, it will pound at you something fierce. You'll get a letter in the mail that says that you have a diagnosis and it's cancer. There's a cop knocking at the door wanting to talk to you about your high school child. There's a papers coming from a lawyer saying that your wife wants a divorce. There's a boss that'll come at you with a pink slip saying that this is your last day at work. There are bills that will come in that are higher than your expenses. There are things that will come at you, things in this life that will just batter you hard. And you will find yourself at times at the darkest part you could ever imagine, where there seems to be no hope. And you cry out to God and you say, God, can you just step in? God, can you just help? God, can you just? The waters are more than I can bear. Everything around me is just destroying me, and I feel like my boat's going to sink. And God will remind you. He notices you. And your boat's not going to sink. Because if your boat's in Him, it will never sink. It will stay above the waters. The only time during the flood that the word surface is used is not to talk about the dirt, not to talk about the ground, but to talk about the waters, which is threatening and is destroying everything. But Moses is alive because he stayed on the surface of the waters. And so it will be for you. It's like when Peter steps out of the boat and walks toward Jesus. What is Jesus doing? He's walking on the water. And when Peter began to sink, and he looks around in fear, and the waves are coming in upon him, and yet Jesus is able to reach down and pull him up, we can be reminded that the waters which threaten to be over our head are still beneath His feet. Because for Him, even the darkest of times is just the surface. And we can stay afloat in Christ. Let me encourage you as you leave here today. I don't know where you're at. I don't know how hard it's been. I don't know how hard your marriage is. I don't know how hard it is to be single for you. I don't know what it's like at your job, at your school. I don't know what it's like with the kids that you have or the parents that you have. I just know that there are times life is hard. and we feel like we're going to sink. I want you to be able to take a moment and just know God notices you. He remembers you. And one day, that deliverance will come. God works all things out for good, which means if good hasn't happened in your life yet, that means the pen is still in His hand. He just hasn't written that paragraph yet. You need to be patient and wait. But the time will come. Let's have a final song.